I wanted to take this episode and highlight the crucial role competition plays in our local elections. Voting is the foundation of a vibrant democracy, but having strong, passionate candidates to choose from is just as essential. Competitive races drive engagement, foster accountability, and give voters meaningful choices to shape the future of their communities. The 2016 presidential election was a wake-up call for many Americans, myself included. By 2017, we saw a surge in civic participation, with new voices entering the political arena and renewed attention on local elections. That energy proved transformative, reshaping local politics in ways that still resonate today. Looking ahead to 2025, we at Adjust Quincy believe we may be on the brink of another wave of civic action. In less than a year, Quincy voters will have the chance to elect city councilors and school committee members. But for those elections to matter, our leaders need to face opposition on the ballot. Without it, they can ignore the voices of the people they represent, deciding unilaterally what issues we hear about, how our tax dollars are spent, and whether they truly need to listen to their constituents. This is why competition isn't just important, it's essential to ensure our local government serves the community and not just an entitled few.
The 2017 Quincy City Council race was one of the most active in recent memory, with 20 candidates vying for 9 seats. Despite this crowded field, 3 of the 6 wards, 2, 3, and 4, saw their incumbent councilors run unopposed, meaning the people in those wards had relatively little dialogue with their councilors in the run-up to the election. In Ward 1, there was no incumbent in the race. Margaret LaForest, who had served several terms as the Ward 1 councilor, opted to run for an at-large seat instead. Dave McCarthy, who ultimately won the Ward 1 race, was no newcomer to Quincy politics. He had previously served on the school committee and had made an unsuccessful bid for an at-large council seat in an earlier election. 3 candidates without prior political experience also entered the Ward 1 race: Mike Falcioni, Dan Davis, and Joe Murphy. In Ward 5, 2 challengers stepped forward to run against the incumbent, Kirsten Hughes. In Ward 6, Bill Harris was the sitting councilor, having secured his position through a contentious legal battle. Harris had initially lost his election but successfully argued in court that he was entitled to the seat following the previous councilor's passing. Harris had to face 2 challengers in the preliminary, giving the ward's 6 voters important options. The at-large race featured 7 candidates, one more than the 6 spots available on the general ballot. As a result, all at-large candidates had to appear on the preliminary ballot to eliminate one name. 5 of the candidates were well-known figures in Quincy politics: Margaret LaForest, a multi-term Ward 1 councilor; Noel DeBona, an incumbent at-large councilor; Nina Leong, another incumbent at-large councilor; and Mahoney, a former school committee member and past mayoral candidate; Daniel Raimondi, the longest-serving ward councilor in Quincy's history before stepping down in 2012. Among the 7, Stanley Shao and Steve Tuga stood out, albeit for unconventional reasons. Stanley ran on a platform centered around increasing beautification efforts across Quincy, but his message struggled to gain traction with voters. Similarly, Steve Tugas conducted an unconventional campaign with a platform disconnected from Quincy and filled with several unpopular, fringe opinions, making his candidacy easy for many to dismiss. However, by stepping up and running, Stanley and Steve provided an important service. Their willingness to join the race forced the at-large incumbents to campaign earlier than usual for the preliminary election. This gave voters an earlier opportunity to hear from all candidates and engage with the issues. The mix of fresh voices and seasoned politicians made the at-large race particularly competitive and engaging, drawing significant early attention from voters.
The 2017 municipal election was pivotal, reinforcing an already strong incumbency that still shapes the council to this moment. Half of the people who won their races in this election remain in their seats today. Let's start with Ward 1. Dave McCarthy, while not technically an incumbent in 2017, was already a well-connected political figure. A former school committee member and an at-large candidate, McCarthy entered the council as a reliable ally of the mayor. In Ward 5, incumbent Kirsten Hughes secured her re-election, while in Ward 6, sitting councilor Bill Harris successfully retained his seat. The at-large race, however, was full of surprises. Two prominent political figures, Margaret LaForest and Dan Raimondi, who both placed in the top three during the preliminary election weeks earlier, ultimately failed to win at-large positions. Meanwhile, Nina Liang made a remarkable comeback, jumping from fifth into the preliminary, to a secure spot on the council. And Mahoney also made significant gains, moving from fourth to second place to claim a seat. The stark difference between the preliminary and general elections was surprising, given the experience and political power of Raimondi and LaForest. Anne Mahoney went on to retain her at-large position through two more election cycles before running for mayor in 2023. Nina and Noel, alongside Scott Campbell, a longtime presence in Quincy politics as a staffer and member of several boards and committees, ran unopposed in 2023. Ward 5 has seen notable shifts since 2017. Kirsten Hughes chose not to run for re-election, and Chuck Phelan won the seat, serving 2 terms before deciding not to run for a third in 2023. With no incumbent in that race, Daniel Minton won the Ward 5 seat in 2023. In Ward 2, long-serving Councilor Brad Kroll stepped down in 2021. Anthony Andronico was appointed to fill the vacancy. He won later in 2021, but was unseated by Richard Ashe in 2023. Ward 4 saw its longtime councilor appointed to a district court judgeship by former Governor Charlie Baker. James Devine won a special election and retained the seat later that same year during the general election. Despite these changes in a few political pockets, the majority of the current city councilors have held their positions since 2017 or earlier, solidifying their influence over the city's leadership. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about incumbency advantage. I am always talking about this. I rail against it. It upsets me. But you know what? To be fair, it's not a Quincy problem. It's definitely an American government problem, and it's probably worldwide. Incumbents have opportunities to advertise themselves just by doing what they were elected to do. So you can show up as zoning board, planning board, just the city council meetings, whatever, what have you. And that's an advantage because, people are seeing you do what you were elected to do. It's almost like an advertisement, except it's not. And on top of that, you can have community meetings whenever you want. Just set a community meeting for your ward, and it's almost like a rally, or a meet and greet. But the point is now, the incumbency advantage in Quincy has gotten so big because we're not even getting challengers. So if you're not being challenged for the seat, your incentive to go the extra mile, to put out a newsletter, to have community meetings, to show up to all the zoning board and planning boards like you've been elected to do, goes away because there's no political cost to half-assing your job. So let's take a look at who's still around from 2017. Dave McCarthy has been in office 8 years. Ian Kane, 10 years. Bill Harris, 9 years. And both Nina and Noel have been in office for 10 years. So let's talk a little specifics about the Quincy incumbent advantage. Since 2005, there have been 60 ward races. That's 6 wards times 10 elections. And in those races, how many times do you think people ran unopposed? 33. 55% basically. How many times has an incumbent been in the race? 49. Over 80% of the ward races feature an incumbent. And how many times did an incumbent lose? Twice.
What kinds of problems do uncontested elections pose?
Well, it makes it less engaging as an event for a potential voter, but it also raises questions about the accountability of government. Even if the challenger to the incumbent, say, was not highly competitive, it at least is a voice in the election cycle who's keeping that incumbent honest, maybe forcing them to attend a debate. There's some evidence from political science research that contested elections produce actually better running government and more informed voters.
Barack Obama said, "The most powerful way to create change is to become part of the system and then fix it from within." Adjust Quincy is looking for candidates. We have time, but we don't have time to waste. Write to us at info@adjustquincy.com if you want to discuss running for a Quincy office. Or come to our meet and greet in January. Right now, we plan to host a coffee hour on Saturday, January 11th. More details to come as it gets closer. Think about it. We need you and we want to help.
It's Marty Huggins. I'm running for Congress.
Huh? Does this mean we got a campaign?